Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. That is, for being codependent. Now in your 20s, you're exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in crap relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hey girl, hey. Today's episode is sponsored by Frame, a therapist matching service. Stay tuned till the end of the episode to hear more. Also, did y'all know I have a free course? I sounded super country right then. I'm from LA, but Codependummy 101. It's made with love and intention to help you stop being such a codependummy so you can shine like a codependent diamond. Sign up now at codependummy.com and let me slide into your inbox. Deets at the end of the episode. And now, today's episode, Codependency and COVID. Codependency and Coronavirus. How is that even a thing, right? If we are all locked up in our homes, socially distanced, and more isolated from others, how can we be codependent, right? How can a codependent be codependent without a bunch of people around her? I will explain. First, I do want to highlight that all the examples up to this episode have been from my past. I've talked about ways I was raised, reinforced, and rewarded to be codependent throughout my childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. I've often referred to myself as a codependent diamond at 32, but I can still be a codependent dummy at times and definitely experienced it off and on this past year since Los Angeles went into lockdown. Second, we're going to work with one description of codependency since you and me are on a mission to truly define what it is, what it looks like, and what it means for you, right? Codependency is really relative. I think we are starting to discover that. So Theodore Millon in 1981 listed the following diagnostic criteria for dependent personalities. Okay, this is very psychological language. You might tune out for the next minute or so, which is totally fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read these 5 criteria. Then I'm going to break them down and give you an example from each of them and how I was codependent this past year. And then also break down what you can do to challenge the criteria. What's the opposite that I really want you to implement? So, Mr. Millon found that those with dependent personalities, 1, characteristically, right, their character is docile, and non-competitive, and they avoid social tension and conflict. Millon called it Pacific temperament. So, hello, new word. I love the Pacific Ocean, and I have a Pacific temperament. 2, codependents need a stronger, nurturing figure, and without one, they feel anxiously helpless. They are often conciliatory, placating, and self-sacrificing, which Millon called interpersonal submissiveness. 3, codependents, they perceive themselves as weak, fragile, and ineffectual. They exhibit a lack of confidence by belittling their own aptitudes and competencies, which he called inadequate self-image. Hello, title of the podcast, belittling our own aptitudes. I'm a codependummy. Yes. 4th, Millon described those as codependent. They reveal a naive or benign attitude toward interpersonal difficulties, like, there's no problem. And they smooth over troubling events. a Pollyanna cognitive style. And fifth, last of these psychological terms, they prefer a subdued, uneventful, and passive lifestyle and avoid self assertion and refuse autonomous responsibility, which he called initiative deficit. We have a deficit in initiating things. So I know you're asking, Marissa, what in the actual fuck does that even mean? So dense, so complicated, and I am your codependummy translator. Okay, girl? I'm gonna break it down and help you understand. So first, the first criterion, which I'm hesitant to use because I'm not sure if I'm using that word correctly. So if I'm not, please email me, Marissa at codependummy.com. So there's criteria, the 5 criteria, and this is the first criterion. Right? Millon said, characteristically docile and non-competitive, and they avoid social tension and conflict. Docile. I looked that up, and it means ready to accept instruction, obedient, compliant. Right? Like, fuck, yes, that is me being a little codependummy in quarantine. So, reflecting back this past year, LA County, where I'm located, went into lockdown on March 19th, according to Google. I went into lockdown with my partner on March 13th because I am docile. I am ready to accept instruction. I am obedient and compliant. And I was watching the daily press briefings of the White House. I was listening to podcasts about coronavirus, and I literally internalized Fauci and thought, what would Fauci want me to do, right? Being a codependummy. I, watched all the videos on how to wash my dishes and complied with those. I kept 6 feet apart from people, arguably 10 feet. And I was so compliant, obedient, that I did not see my family for a month. And I'll touch on this in future episodes, but I really want to highlight how, despite being codependent with my family, right? Like, Fauci came in and I neglected that relationship. So we can really pick and choose. Of course, my family wanted to see me, and my sister was saying I was being dramatic, but I was less dependent on her approval at that time than Fauci's. And I'm talking about him like it's personal, and it wasn't. He doesn't even know me. But again, being so docile and obedient, I was following what he said, right? I wanted to please. I'm obedient. I will accept instruction. We can't sustain being codependent with everyone all the time, or we would literally die. So I guess that's a good thing. And right, Millon says avoiding social tension and conflict. Yes, I did not want to do anything or post anything that would lead to conflict. So I didn't, right? Of course, I wanted to be safe. Of course, I didn't want to get the virus, but I saw people judging others, criticizing others. I internalized that and I did what I could do to avoid that tension and conflict, right? And Pacific temperament, I didn't question anything. I was continuing to get my exercise. I work out very early. And the whole time I didn't see anybody, but you bet I had my mask on, right? Pleasing the powers that be. Fauci would be so proud. So there's some examples of how I met and demonstrated Criterion, the first Criterion. What comes up for you as I review this and your own response to quarantine, to the rules of quarantine, to the social tension that came about maybe in your family, in your community, internationally. Mhm. Second criterion, dependent personalities, we need a stronger, nurturing figure. And without one, we feel anxiously helpless. We are often conciliatory, placating, and self sacrificing. So, in early March, when the media coverage of COVID was increasing, I remember watching the news with my husband, and I looked at him and I said, if we go into lockdown, I'm going to my mom and dad's. Mind you, I'm 31 years old, a proud homeowner, and I've been with my husband, partner for 7 years. But the thought of going into lockdown for a sustained amount of time, I was like, I'm like, what? I'm going to my mom and dad's. So thankfully, he responded, Marissa, you can't go to your parents. You have to stay here. And I was like, dang it. Right? Even as a grown ass woman, I was feeling anxious, stressed, and worried. And I regressed to an old behavior of having my mom and dad take care of me, right? I needed that strong, nurturing figure. And I didn't see or forecast that being myself in lockdown with my husband at home. I didn't forecast it being my husband in lockdown. No, I wanted to go back to my familiar home and just be all loved and in lockdown there. So just to let you guys know, this in psychological terms, we would refer to this as regression, which thanks to Freud, he named this, and it's when we return to a former way of coping, typically under stress. Okay, so some of you may know, some of you in your 20s may not, but Peter Jennings, he was a famous news anchor, and he quit smoking for 20 years. 20 years, right? Way to go, Peter. And then he started smoking again after covering September 11th, right? So he had a new stressor and he regressed. He returned to an old coping skill. And so if you have regressed in any way this past year, just know it's very much part of human nature to do that. Let me know if you have. So here I was looking for a stronger, nurturing figure in my parents. And right, the second part of the criterion in regards to a conciliatory, right, which means placating, that's the same thing, and self-sacrificing. Well, my husband and I had not used Instacart before the lockdown. And I went to the store one time after safer at home orders started and declared I was never going back because I was so anxious and no one was following the rules, right? Fauci would be so upset with us. So once a week, beginning in March, we ordered Instacart. And by we, I mean I. And then I really, there's a learning curve with Instacart. So I had to deal with changes to the orders, problems with delivery. One time, I don't think the order went through, or it did go through, but they never came to deliver it. Once they delivered it to the wrong house. And today, a year later, I love Instacart. I don't think I'm ever going to go to the grocery store again. Okay, if someone from Instacart is listening and they want to be a sponsor, I will be a proud user of Instacart. I love it. But it was a learning curve, and for the first 6 or 7 months of quarantine, of our lockdown, I was messaging back and forth with the shopper. I was messaging back and forth with the help center, walking around my neighborhood, trying to find where they delivered it to a nearby neighbor because it said delivered and it was obviously not at our house, right? Woe is me. And I remember, right? I would be sitting with my husband and complaining to him. I would complain to my family and tell them a funny story about something from the order, when suddenly, after like 6 months of small little difficulties, right? I looked over at my husband just watching YouTube on his phone, right? Playing video games with his friends and eating our Instacart orders to his heart's content. And I was like, hold up. Like, I'm over here self-sacrificing my time, my energy, my free time to deal with Instacart, right? I'm just this martyr, and I need to let him take over. Like, he is completely capable of ordering food and making sure it gets here. And part of me doubted that. I really did, which is, again, like our self sacrificing, our controlling, our I'll do it because they can't, right? That was all intertwined. But I didn't even realize it for months. For months, I didn't see or realize what I was doing. And so I talked with him. He took over for the next 6 months, and now we trade off every single month. Right? Simple solution. But again, this need to self-sacrifice, this need to take on more responsibilities, to be docile, conciliatory, placating, right? I don't want to burden others. I don't want to burden him. What comes up for you? Right? Where have you sought a stronger, nurturing figure? Or you've been anxious without one? Or you've been self sacrificing this past year of quarantine? All right, third, dependent personalities, codependence. We perceive ourselves as weak, fragile, and ineffectual. We exhibit a lack of confidence by belittling our own aptitudes and competencies. I did feel weak. I did feel fragile since the lockdown was having such a drastic impact on my mental health. And then I felt bad for being so down, so depressed, so discouraged, right? I should be grateful. I should count my blessings. So many people have it so much worse off from me. I sound like a spoiled, ungrateful brat complaining if and when I'm having a hard time, right? Why are you so scared, Marissa? You're in the age range where this won't hurt you, and you're being a little drama queen. I did look up ineffectual, which means lacking the ability or qualities to cope with a role or situation. Thank you, Google. And I felt very ineffectual off and on this past year, right? I looked at my husband, my partner, and he was doing a good job coping in quarantine. And I was over here crying and worrying, and again, belittled myself and thought I was being dramatic. And I got shamed by a fellow pedestrian. So let me tell you this story. Let's say it was like May. Say it was May. So two months into quarantine, and right, I'm getting my steps in. I was practicing self-care, and anytime I was out walking or running, I had my mask or bandana on. But when I saw someone, I would step down from the sidewalk. I would cross the street sometimes. I would tie my shoe and like not breathe while they walked by me, you name it, right? Whatever I could do to maintain social distance, right? Because I'm a good little quarantine girl. Thanks, Dr. Fauci. So one morning, I'm walking near my home, and this man is coming from the opposite direction, right? So he's coming towards me, and I step down to the street where there's cars, actually. So I was actually walking on the outside left side of the cars, and he's on the sidewalk. And even before that, right, every time I did it, I would think, oh gosh, I really hope that these people don't think I'm stepping down because I think they're a creep or a robber or a bad person. I hope. Like, can't have random pedestrians thinking I think negatively of them, being a codependent dummy. I'm just so aware of other people. So, stepping down, right, had that thought, and I walked past him, bandana on my face, hat on my head, and he looked at me and he shook his head from left to right with such disdain in his eyes. Like, shame, shame, shame on you, you racist bitch. He happened to be Black. And I like froze, and I didn't say anything and stayed in the street, continued walking because there were two Latinx women behind him, these nice older ladies. They were on the sidewalk. So, but I wanted to turn and yell at him, like, you got me all wrong, mister. I'm not racist. I'm just following 6 feet apart. And then part of me was like, oh, like, I hope he was watching me and he saw that I didn't go up past these two ladies. So, like, he'll realize I'm a good person. And I did. I felt so bad. And I belittled myself so much for being so anxious as to step down and offend this kind Black male. Right. And I tried to think, like, well, shame on him for shaming me because he didn't have a mask on and he wasn't practicing social distance, but it was hard. It was really, really hard. And random man, if you're out there and listening, I really was just practicing social distance, and I hope we can be friends someday. So, what comes up for you in ways that you have really belittled or perceived yourself as weak, fragile, and ineffectual this past year? All right, 2 more criterion. So, fourth, codependence, we reveal a naive or benign attitude toward interpersonal difficulties, and we smooth over troubling events, right? This Pollyanna cognitive style. So this example, this criterion, what I'm going to share is very personal. My best friend was planning to have her wedding last June, and I have the honor and privilege of being a bridesmaid. So just to acknowledge, Michelle, if you're listening, I love you so much. And I am so, so excited to party this May because we're all going to be vaccinated. Okay, so hi, Michelle. And I can't remember the specific timeline of the wedding since the first few months of quarantine are an anxious blur. But she did have to reschedule the original date last June. And at that time, I was worried about getting it since I'd heard of other weddings that were super spreaders. But, right, I kept that benign attitude since it's her wedding, right? Everything's going to be fine. I'll just wear an N95 mask and a shield and we'll be good, right? Just smoothing over this troubling event. So it got rescheduled and we were very optimistic, like December. Maybe things will be better in December. And numbers were going down in the summer, but who knew? And, come October, come November in California, the virus was popping off, like record setting. Where is all this virus coming from? Is everybody just making out and breathing into each other's mouths? Because it was like, what is happening? What is happening? Mind you, I did decide last summer, I did a news fast, a news cleanse, and stopped reading the news because it was giving me so much anxiety and negatively impacting my mental health and my sleep. But then here I was in October, in November, completely compromising that limit, that boundary for myself to look at the numbers, to study the charts, right? Look at the prophecies from Fauci for what December would look like. And I was nervous, anxious, and scared. Right? Like the headline of the 32-year-old woman who got diagnosed one day and was dead the next was highly effective, whoever that news source was. And, I had done some social distance happy hours. I had done social distance walks with masks on and protested. Other than that, nothing. So I was talking with my family, watching the numbers, feeling nervous, but remaining naive, benign, and smoothing over the troubling event. And eventually, the codependent diamond in me realized what a codependummy I was being. And I called my friend and I told her, I love you. I'm scared, so I can't come. And I will find a way to celebrate with you a later date. And thankfully, she was understanding, while I'm sure she was hurt and got off the phone and cried because I think she was getting a lot of calls like that anyways. But I was scared. And I also didn't want to hurt her. And so I had to find some way to come to some solution with my fear and her feelings in mind, where I wasn't compromising and also didn't feel like I was deliberately hurting her. And they have family from the other side of the country, so there was talk of having another side of the country wedding. And I said, I will be there. Like, sign me up for when that's scheduled. That is the wedding I will attend. And the words that I spoke to her arguably took me a couple therapy sessions to form. And guess what? That date got rescheduled too. So I'm going to the one in June, but right, it felt good to I didn't know. I didn't know if it was going to be canceled or not. Things were looking good, things were looking bad, and I just had to communicate and assert my needs while being mindful of our friendship. So, what comes up for you in ways that maybe you too have had a naive or benign attitude towards interpersonal difficulties, or where you smoothed over troubling events? And last but not least, right, the fifth criterion, codependence, we prefer a subdued, uneventful, and passive lifestyle. And we avoid self-assertion and refuse autonomous responsibility. I love an uneventful and passive lifestyle, right? Because that means I don't have to have any conflict or confrontation with anyone. So one time I went and got frozen yogurt with my husband last summer, and there were signs everywhere, 6 feet apart, masks on. The line's outdoors. You go inside for a little bit. They got the plastic all over, just very adherent. And I went to stand in line. Hubs was with our dog, and there were two gentlemen and a woman standing behind me. And they were not standing on the 6 feet apart sticker. They were like 4 feet behind me. And I was uncomfortable, right? Like, I know the research now is like, you can't really get it outside, but we didn't know that then. And I'm, so adherent, so compliant, following instructions. And I'm standing there and I somehow, grew the ovaries to say, "Excuse me, can you please stand on the 6 feet from me? Thank you." And one of the guys, he took the most dramatic and obnoxious step to the 6-foot sticker. Like, ugh. And I thought, oh God, Marissa, right? It wasn't upset with him. It was, why did you have to say anything? Right? And I think I even lied. And I was like, I'm high risk. Like, thank you. Like I had to explain or add a reason, a rationale why I was asking him to comply with, I don't know, the world. So I remember like he even said, "Oh, I have the antibodies. Like I got it in New York." And it's like, okay, cool. Like I didn't know that. I don't know that. Like we're supposed to be 6 feet apart. And yeah, I felt really uncomfortable standing there the remainder of waiting and making my order. And then even when I was paying, I remember like he was just kind of circling me. And I just felt like he was like, "Fuck you, lady. I'm going to stand wherever I want." Right? This is why you don't say anything, Marissa. This is why you don't assert yourself or take responsibility for your autonomy. Just sit and breathe in all those shared droplets and we'll be good. So there's my little codependummy, like codependummy, going back to being codependummy. And then the codependent diamond in me says, that guy's a dick. And next time I can say, I'd like to talk to the manager and get the help that I need, right? I do not have to stand in line 4 feet from someone when we don't know what's actually happening and everybody's encouraging 6 feet. I don't have to cope with the anxiety that brings, right? I can say, back the fuck up. So, my little codependummy, what comes up for you? Ways that you've been preferring a subdued passive lifestyle, avoiding self-assertion, or refusing responsibility for your autonomy, right? What comes up? And there you have it. The 5 criteria for how I, and maybe you, have been codependent in quarantine. So these criteria, right, they are not sustainable. We cannot be walking through life trying to have this passive lifestyle, smoothing over emotional problems and thinking that we're ineffectual. So this week, I want to challenge you, right? One area of your life where you have met one of the criteria and do the opposite. Okay, so the first criteria, right? If you're being docile, where can you do the opposite and be willful in a safe manner, where you can have a productive conflict or resolve a tension? For the second, right? We need a nurturing figure. How can you be that nurturing figure to yourself? How can you get in touch with your own strength, your own, not self-sacrifice, but self-saving, self-rescue? The third criteria, right? We're weak, we're belittling. How can you be strong and enlarging to yourself, like diamond? The fourth criteria, right? We're naive or benign. How can you be assertive and address any difficulty or event? And the fifth, how can you, instead of having this passive life, how can you embrace self-assertion, have an active life, and take responsibility for your autonomy in some relationship, ice cream parlor, work environment? Let me know how it goes. And thank you so much for listening. Please remember, if you don't feel seen, I see you. If you don't feel heard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. This is Marissa Escobel, your hostess mostess of the Codependummy podcast, and I will see you next week. Today's episode is sponsored by Frame, a therapist matching service. Founded in May of 2020, they're on a mission to help you find the perfect therapist. Go to tryframe.com/dummy. How it works, you create a profile, answer questions about you and what you want to work on in therapy, and then voila! Frame matches you with 6 to 8 therapists. You can browse, talk to each of them, and choose the therapist that's just right for you. Using Frame is free, and they're also offering my listeners an exclusive code for $20 off each of your first 3 sessions once you match with a therapist. Go to www.tryframe.com/DUMMY. Also, have you signed up for my free course, Codependummy 101? It's a 10-part course, and it was made to help you stop being such a codependummy so you can shine like a codependent. It's on my website, www.codependummy.com. There's, again, 10 parts, sentence completion to help build awareness for where you're codependent, homework to disengage from one task where you're doing something for someone that they can do for themselves, like Instacart orders. There's something about right, finding a codependent role model besides me, and so much more. Go to www.codependummy.com to sign up. It's free. F-R-E-E.
You're still here? Just kidding. Girl, this is not therapy, and I'm not your therapist, okay? This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the publisher, or the guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional information. If you want or need a professional, you should find one.